This is Maple Blues.
Welcome to the Maple Blues Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the NHL, the St. Louis Blues, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and other things hockey. I'm Penguin Note.
And I'm Charlie ND.
And today, or tonight's episode, is about the trade deadline. I don't know what else we're talking about, but the trade deadline happened. Some big things happened. People were complaining that it was so boring. But we're going to talk about it anyway. So, Charlie, do you want to begin with what you think was a big trade?
Yeah. So, prior to us recording this episode, or down the stretch leading towards the trade deadline, I was getting ready for the worst case scenario, and that was me having to monologue about how Treliving has not woken up from his nap and how nothing's going on, he's not doing anything, and we need to be hard sellers at the deadline, and we didn't do enough. But at the 11th hour, he actually started making some trades. The whole season was basically just radio silence from him, even though it was very clear early on that this Toronto Maple Leafs team had some glaring issues. So, to recap what I talked about in the last episode, the Toronto Maple Leafs gave away their first-round pick to the Boston Bruins. However, it was top 5 protected. And that left us in a very bad position, because if we didn't start winning or start losing a whole lot, then we were going to finish in no man's land. Now, things have changed, and I think everyone at the Maple Leafs organization has basically come to the conclusion that this season's a lost cause, and they need to start making adjustments now. It's about time they figured that out. So, Nicholas Roy to the Colorado Avalanche for a conditional 2027 first-round pick and a conditional 2026 fifth-round pick. So, for those of you who need a refresher, we got Nick from the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for none other than Mitch Marner. So essentially, over the course of the last year, we got Marner for picks. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Nicholas Roy, he wasn't terrible, to be honest. I feel like some people are unfair to him, especially like early on, because like he's not Marner. But you know what? That's not his fault. So this team's gearing up for the future. They knew they had to sell, and that was one of the first dominoes to fall. So we have 2 picks in the bank. That's great. Although, to be fair, it is Colorado we're talking about, so how good are those picks really going to be? But I think that was definitely more beneficial for the Leafs, and you know, I'm sure Waugh's going to be happy to be on a team that's contending for a Stanley Cup, so win for both parties. And then we have Bobby McMahon to the Seattle Kraken for a 2027 second-round pick and a 2026 fourth-round pick. Bobby McMahon was actually the only Leaf who I had on my fantasy hockey team. So I woke up to the sight of him now being part of the Seattle Kraken. He was a reliable forward. He made a lot of important plays on the ice that helped the team offensively. And he was generally well-liked among the fan base. So, you know, just sentimentally, I'm sad to see him go. So we got a 2026 fourth and a 2027 second, like I said. I honestly think we probably could have done better for him, if I'm being completely honest. Now he's going to a Seattle Kraken team that is hopeful to get into the playoffs for the second time in their franchise history. You know, I'm glad he's going to Seattle. I'm glad he's going to a team that I don't hate. That's what I'm mostly concerned about. But overall, I don't think this is the best trade. I don't think this is the best we could have gotten for him. Scott Laughton to the Los Angeles Kings for a conditional 2026 third-round pick. Scott Laughton, I would say he was a workhorse during the playoffs last year. He was very well-liked among the fan base. The line he was on was like very good at like wearing down other teams during the playoffs last year. he was one of our trade deadline acquisitions from the previous season. So we all knew he was going to be a rental. Like, realistically, we all knew he wasn't going to stay very long. I really wish he could have hoisted a cup in Toronto. It's a shame he isn't, but Kings fans, if you're listening, you're very fortunate to have Scott Laughton. And he's already scored a goal. He's already scored a goal for the Kings. So, I think this is a loss for the Leafs, to be honest. Like, a conditional third for Scott Laughton, no, that's just not it. So, to recap, Nick Waugh, I think we won that trade. Bobby McMahon and Scott Laughton, I think we lost that trade. And I don't think we did enough. To be honest, I thought this was a disappointing trade deadline. I don't think we sold as much as we had to. This was very clear. This had to be an aggressive selling spree. And it was not an aggressive selling spree. At least not nearly as aggressive as it had to be. And we didn't get enough. We didn't get enough back. So, going forward here, I think the Leafs are doomed for another rebuild. Well, maybe not a full rebuild, because there's a good chance that the core players on this team are going to stick around. We don't know that for sure, but there's a good chance that they do stick around. And if that's the case, then you can't really brand this as a rebuild. It's just a retool. And I know that, like, a lot of hockey fans, they're quick to stick their noses up at the idea of a retool because that worked so well for the Vancouver Canucks. But that's what this is. At this point in time, it is a retool. Even if, the management or anyone else is reluctant to brand it as such, that's what it looks like to me. So, bottom line, a couple of years we're not going to be in the playoffs, and realistically we'll be able to compete for a cup again, maybe in the early 2030s, but I think these next few years I'm not going to be paying as close attention to hockey as I usually am for that reason. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see how the Leafs navigate this troubling situation they're in. But to be honest, unless some sweeping changes are made up top, I'm not very hopeful. And that's the end of my spiel.
Okay, and about a year ago and a day ago, and the Maple Leafs traded for Scott Laughton, I messaged you because apparently the Leafs wanted Braden Shen, but he didn't waive his no-trade clause. And that's basically Scott Laughton was plan B. And I mentioned that the Leafs overpaid. People say they did. You did mention that he was a workhorse and the fans loved him, but he was basically plan B and a rental. And the reason I bring this up is because Braden Shen, the Blues captain, or now former captain, was traded. He was traded to the New York Islanders for Jonathan Drouin, a prospect, a conditional first that belongs to the Avalanche, and a third-round pick. So, for me, it sucks that Shen was traded, but it had to be done. The Blues are not going to make the playoffs, although I'll get more into that later. They're not doing so well in the standings, and get what you can with assets you can trade. And apparently, that wasn't the only trade the Blues made. The other trade, the other big one, they made with the Detroit Red Wings. They traded Justin Falk, who has had a really good year, for Justin Hall, another prospect, a first-round pick, and a third-round pick. So now, I bring things up. Both of these trades happened at, the last hour, and a lot of Blues fans were complaining for that. Armstrong's doing nothing. He needs to do something. Wake up from your nap. I could just see everyone freaking out. Then all of a sudden, these two trades happen, and everyone has declared the Blues as winning the trade deadline, which, you're able to get 2 first-round picks, although one of those first-round picks belongs to the Avalanche, so I guess that makes 2 of us that need the Avalanche to fall down the standings a better pick. So I'm going to be rooting for Avalanche upset watch at some point later in the playoffs, but the Blues make a few trades. A lot of people are declare the Blues as winners. The Blues got assets, and Jonathan Drouin has already slotted into the lineup. And yeah, so it sucks that the Blues were sellers again, but it had to be done. But I bring this up, the Blues now all of a sudden, they have won 4 in a row since last Sunday, since a week ago. They've won 4 in a row. They swept a road trip, and I am just baffled. Now, all of a sudden, and they're not just that, they've won 5 out of 6 since the post-Olympic break. It just baffles me because this team was dead. They looked dead at like the end of February. Now all of a sudden they're pulling out wins left and right. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration since last year is still kind of fresh in my head. As people thinking, could it happen again? No, it's not going to happen. I'm going to pull up Money Puck with playoff odds. Money Puck gives the Blues now they gave them a 1.2% chance. Earlier they gave them the Blues a 0.6%. Now after that 4-0 win against Anaheim, now they have a 1.2% chance of making the playoffs and a 9% chance of getting the first overall pick. So I'm still Team Tank, get the top draft pick, or at least get top 2, 3 in the draft lottery. But I don't know. I do not know what's going to happen. Fans are fearing that they're going to start winning and then they're going to get to be stuck in mediocrity and getting like the 15th overall pick in the draft. Will be.
Well, I'm sort of at the situation where, from my position, I am now cheering for the Blues' success. They are so far undefeated in the month of March, which is what I want, because, like I said before, the Leafs pick is top 5 protected, so we need to fall as far back as possible. So you better believe that I, as well as every other Leafs fan, is cheering for the Blues' success. Except in the game against us. I hope you guys win all your remaining games except the one against us. And also your one remaining game against Anaheim. But win all the other ones, please. Just finish out the season strong, please. We need that top 5 pick. Honestly, the Toronto Maple Leafs really need to just be banned from making any trades with the Bruins, okay? Because, we gave up Tuukka Rask, although no one knew it was going to be Tuukka Rask at the time. Actually, I forget it was either a pick or, he was a prospect at the time. I don't really remember. It was, a long time ago. And now we gave away a pick and Fraser Minton for Carlo. Why are we giving away a first-round pick for Carlo? That is insane. But, yes, I'm looking at the Blues schedule now, and see you guys play the Islanders next, who just had that big trade involving Shen. So he's going to be returning to St. Louis as an Islander for the first time.
Yeah, I'll be at that game.
Oh, cool. But yeah, the Islanders, they're that team that, I remember, last year when they got that first overall pick, I was, stunned. You never see a team fall that far. And they got Matthew Schaefer out of it. Matthew Schaefer has been one of the most productive rookie defensemen the NHL has ever seen. Guys like this don't come around very often. And I wanted to talk about him in the previous episode, and I forgot. But this guy is, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's very uncommon for defensemen to be putting up as many points as he has in his rookie season. So to say the Islanders got astronomically lucky in the draft would be an understatement. 46 points and already for a defenseman, and the season's not even over yet. That's crazy. I guess in the next episode we're going to be talking about the playoffs, or maybe even this episode, but by the time we do our next episode, the picture of the playoffs will be looking more clear. I haven't been paying attention to it that much, if I'm being honest, because, my team's not going to be in it, but it'll be interesting to see how the Islanders fare in the playoffs against whoever they end up playing. Actually, I don't even know if they're in a playoff spot. I've completely forgotten about the standings. Oh yeah, they are. Okay. They'd be playing Pittsburgh, but that's not set in stone yet, so we're not going to be worrying too much about playoffs matchups this episode, because that can still change. But yeah, they're an up-and-coming team. Speaking of up-and-coming teams, the Buffalo Sabres. I'm assuming you saw their game today, or at least you heard about their game with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh yeah, I did see the 8-7 victory by the Sabres or the Lightning. That was just crazy. And there were a bunch of fights. People were calling it like a 90s game or an 80s game. It was crazy.
Yeah. 8-7. A classic barn burner of a game. There's one every season. And here we stand, and it's looking likely that playoffs hockey is going to be returning to Buffalo. First in the Atlantic Division, which is crazy to say. Like, it's very uncommon that a team goes from missing the playoffs to first in their division. That's not very common in the NHL. That almost never happens. And that building was rocking, dude. Like, these guys have missed playoffs hockey a lot, and it felt like a playoffs game. That game had the energy and atmosphere of a playoffs game. So when it actually comes time for the playoffs, that building is going to be rocking, and they're going to be hungry for playoff success.
That's actually a good way to segue into another thing I want to talk about, which was that potential Parayko trade. So apparently, there was a deal in place to send Colton Parayko, the Blues defenseman, to the Sabres for a first-round pick and one of the Sabres' first-round pick last year, their first-round choice. I forgot his name was, but that was the initial report. It was leaked everywhere, like this was a done deal. However, Parayko had a no-trade clause. He had to waive it, and he didn't waive it. And everyone kept waiting and waiting and waiting until, like, I think right before Friday's Blues game, he rejected the trade. And eventually, it was leaked by someone. The Blues apparently did not do that because their GM, Doug Armstrong, apparently did some full FBI investigation into every single phone call and text to see if anyone in the Blues leaked it, which they didn't. So apparently, it had to be either someone on the Sabres side or some reporter got wind of it. But it was just crazy because I was texting with one of my friends. We were messaging all the reports of what could be happening. Is this going to happen or not? And it was just crazy. I'm glad Parayko stayed because I think he could probably be the next captain. Since Shen's gone, the Blues technically do not have a captain. They just have a bunch of alternates. But yeah, it was crazy. So the Sabres' plan B was to get Luke Shen and Logan Stanley from the Jets, which means they're going all in. The Sabres know this is the year. They can not only end the drought, but win a round, go on a deep run, reward the fans of Buffalo, which I'm proud of them. I'd be happy. I would like to see the Sabres go deep. I think they've earned it. They have suffered a lot in this decade and a half without playoffs. Almost a decade and a half. If they break the drought, they will prevent 15 years. So I'm hopeful for Buffalo.
I want to say the same thing. I don't think any fan base deserves to go that long without the playoffs. Like, just for perspective, I was 8 years old last time they were in the playoffs, in second grade. And that was the year the Canucks went to the finals, and it was a big deal over here. But it was that long ago. And while I do want them to find some playoff success, with them being our closest rival, I could not in good conscience hope for them to win the Stanley Cup. I'll be happy for their success, but if push comes to shove and they find themselves in the finals, I will be cheering against them. I mean, unless you're playing like the Oilers or something, but yeah. But they deserve it. Truthfully, for sticking by that franchise, anyone who has attended a Sabres game in like the past decade can claim that they've been there before all the bandwagoners show up, and those loyal fans deserve it. So, good for them. I probably won't be paying as much attention to the playoffs this year. I'll probably be watching the NBA playoffs a bit more closely, but it will be fun to see the Sabres in it once again. So, I think that pretty much sums up all the important trades regarding our teams. Are there any other league-wide trades that you caught wind of that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, so Nazem Kadri's going back to the Avalanche, and I only bring that up because I know people think, oh, the Blues fans are not gonna like it. I do not care. I've moved on. That was almost 4 years ago. I've moved on. I literally do not care about the whole Nazem Kadri thing. Fans are always going to boo him every time he touches the puck at a game in St. Louis. I think it's cringe. I'm ready to move on. I hope Blues fans also move on eventually. Other than trades, I don't really know. I know John Carlson getting traded to the Ducks. That was big because he was a long-time Capital, but the Capitals are also falling down in the standings. So they traded him to Anaheim, who was another surprising team. But kind of not. A little bit of me that thought the Ducks hiring Joel Quenneville was going to help them get to the playoffs, and Anaheim's being rewarded with it. What else? I don't. I mean,
I actually do want to ask you about something.
yeah. What is it?
Could you refresh my memory? What exactly did Nazem Kadri do to make Blues fans hate him so much?
Okay, so it was the 2022 playoffs, the second round. The Blues were playing the Avalanche. It's game 3. The series is tied 1-1. It's the first period. The Blues are up 1-0. I'm trying to remember. There's a play in front of the net. I believe the puck goes off Bennington's pad. Then Kadri gets tangled up with Calle Rosen, and they get tangled up, and then they crash into Jordan Bennington, and it's a pretty brutal one that Bennington goes down, the net gets dislodged, play is stopped, and he's hurt. Bennington is hurt bad. He's knocked out for the rest of the series, possibly the playoffs, and Blues fans were pissed. And I think they got even more pissed when the Avalanche won that game. Billy Husso, who was originally started the playoffs, then got pulled, was put back in, and he got shelled. Blues fans were pissed, and as a result, they sent just racist and just bad things, death threats and racist messages to Nazem Kadri. And Kadri got revenge. He got a hat trick in Game 4, and the Avalanche eventually won the series in 6. And Blues fans have been pissed at him since. Blues fans blame Kadri. Other fans will say Calle Rosen pushed Kadri into. They say Calle Rosen pushed Kadri into Bennington. From the way I've seen it, they both got tangled. They both lost balance. They both crashed into Bennington. The replay makes it look like Kadri was pushed into Bennington and basically tried to injure him because he had that reputation of getting suspended in the first round. He did it the year before. He did it multiple times with the Maple Leafs. He just had that reputation, and I think that's where it formed. And there was a bit of bad blood that season. There was a bit of an incident with Bennington and Kadri where Bennington swung his stick at him. And yeah, there was just bad blood. And there's probably always going to be bad blood until I think maybe someone steps up and says, all right, it's time to... Maybe someone bigger than me steps up and said, all right, it's time to move. It's going to be almost 4 years ago in May. Yeah, that's about as good of a recap as I can give.
Okay, so I'm looking at the play right now. I have it pulled up. So, actually, I wonder if I can slow this down. Let's see, playback speed. Slow it down a little bit here. Okay, so yeah, here they come. Rebound off of Binnington. Okay, so yeah, I see what you mean. They did get tangled, but it's so obvious that Kadri wasn't trying to go into Binnington, okay, so he had a guy defending him, right? He was making a beeline for the puck after it got deflected. He had a guy on him.
I think it's Calle Rosen who is the defender by him. I think it is Calle Rosen.
Yeah, he's not going for Binnington, right? So he crashes into him and he sort of gets redirected towards Binnington and they both crash into him. And then after that, just people are mostly concerned about Binnington. Normally, stuff would get scrappy after that, but I feel like even the Blues players recognize that it wasn't intentional because in hockey, going after the goalie is a huge you don't do that. That is a big no-no. That is kicking the hornet's nest, so to speak. But none of the Blues players really went after Kadri, as you would expect to see there, because I assume they knew it wasn't his fault, right?
Initially, I don't think they didn't think it was his fault, but I think the mentality was he has his reputation, and they thought he did it intentionally. From one angle, it looks like he's trying to injure him, but I think he said it on an interview with with TNT, he was just trying to get the puck, which that's normally what you would do when there's an open rebound. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now that just happened, and you can't change it. And the worst part was, I felt that series was winnable for the Blues, because honestly, the honest truth, that play changed the series. The Blues' mindset was rattled. The Avalanche took advantage of it. The Avs won in 6, and they won the cup. If the Blues, if Bennington doesn't get injured, what it takes for him to not get injured, he doesn't get injured. The Blues probably win that series. They force it to a game 7. The Blues definitely win because the Avalanche can't win game 7s, and maybe the Blues have another cup, but we'll never know. So yeah, that's why the Blues fans do not like Kadri.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm seeing here, you can see Barbashev, you can see Shen. They're all looking down at Binnington in concern. That was their main thing. Like, they mostly just cared about, was Binnington okay? And for a while, it looked like, he was down and like he was slow to get up. He was clearly in a lot of pain here. So, good on his teammates for checking on his well-being. And I just realized now, Urinating Tree made a video 3 years ago titled Nazem Kadri Rent Free, which I probably watched it back in the day, but
yeah.
I forgot all about it.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago. That's going to be almost 4 years ago in late May, I think May. Yeah, that was my freshman year of high school. And now technically this is my first year in college, so that's almost 4 years ago. Crazy.
Wow. So, yeah. As for how I think of Kadri as a Leafs fan, I love him. Even though the Kadri era was unsuccessful, he was loved by the fan base. Everyone had great things to say about him. With the exception of when he got suspended in that series against the Bruins. That was like the one thing that made a lot of people mad at him, but no one really stayed mad at him for long. He was well loved. He's from Ontario, so generally people there have the perception that he's like a local guy, which helps his reputation a lot. And for that reason, I was happy to see him win the cup in 2022. And maybe in another life, he'd be back with the Leafs. I grew up watching him as a Leaf, but, it'll be good for him to be back on a cup contending team. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. And also, like you said earlier, John Carlson to the Ducks. I think, if I'm not wrong, I might be wrong about this. That means there's only 2 players left from the Caps Cup-winning team. Ovechkin is definitely one of them. I forget who else is, but I think it's only 2. I think everyone else is gone, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, even despite that, well, the Caps have sort of flown under the radar this year, I feel like. They've had some flashes of greatness, some flashes of not so greatness. They still have a positive goal differential, but like the spotlight is not as much on them as it was last season because of Ovechkin's scoring record. But the playoffs are still open for them and for a lot of teams in the East, to be honest. But I think for us in particular, for the Leafs, we need to think of it as a lost cause. We need the Rangers to start winning some games, ideally. I don't know what's going wrong with the Rangers, but they're like in a worse position than we are. And I would like to see both those teams in the playoffs, but it's definitely not happening this year. And the story in the West, you've got Anaheim, who are in first in the Pacific, which is where they deserve to be. 35 wins. And Vegas has 29, yet they're only a point back. Edmonton's still in third. I think that Edmonton would beat Vegas in a series, but I don't want to go too deep into that. And then Utah and Seattle pulling up the wild card spots. That'll actually be crazy if Utah makes the playoffs in their second year of existence. But we'll see how much they can do here. A Seattle versus Colorado rematch. I don't think Seattle's going to get as lucky this time, but again, we'll see what happens. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's hard not to talk about it. Anyways, the Flames, they got a win against the Hurricanes the day before we're recording this, which is good. I need them to win. I need Chicago to win. I need Vancouver to win. I need New York Rangers to win. And honestly, it's like one of those. It's so weird, like having to cheer for a losing team because we didn't expect that we would get this bad so quick. It's kind of difficult to cheer for losing, but, it is what it is. Is there anything else you want to talk about in this episode? Because there is one more thing I want to do after this, if there's anything else you want to talk about.
I'm looking at standings right now. I feel like the West is, if you're not in the Central, the West is wide open. If you're not named, like the wild card, you get what's your reward? Your reward of you get the first wild card, you have a chance at an upset. You're the second wild card, good news, you get the Goliath known as the Avalanche. I mean, we're just internally looking at the playoffs. We could do that in like a future down the stretch episode, like either later this month or in early April. I feel like we covered most of the big trades. Unless there's one I forgot. I'm going to skim through Trade Track for just a bit. I think that may be it. Yeah, I think that may be it that I want to talk about.
All right. Now, before we end this episode, I want to do something to shake things up. Because up until this point, this podcast has just been us, talking about hockey, which is all fun and good. But one thing we haven't done is played a game. I want to play a game with you right now. I want to play you a goal horn from one of the NHL teams, and I want to see if you can identify them. Are you confident you could?
Yes.
Okay. This will be fun then.
Kings.
Nice.
Yeah, I know that one. That is, some Blues fans have some very choice opinions about that one. All right, what else you got for me?
All right.
Minnesota Wild. I've heard this one a bit. Yeah, I've heard this one a bit.
Nice job.
Is that the Lightning?
Correct.
I was going to say the Blues at first, but thought, no, that's a bit too longer. I thought it was the Blues at first, but no, it's the Lightning.
Good job. That one always, stumps a few people. Okay, this one, I think, might be outdated.
Oh, it's the Red Wings.
Yep.
I had a feeling when you said outdated, it was going to be the Red Wings, because the only other one I could think of was maybe Utah, and even then, nobody could really tell the difference between Utah. But yeah, this is actually a pretty fun game. I'm glad you brought up this idea, but I think that's about it for tonight's episode, at least for me, because I do have class tomorrow. It's not until 1 o'clock my time, but I think that's all for me for this episode. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's about it.
This was definitely a great idea. So, with that being said, from me and Charlie, I think this is going to wrap it up for this episode. We will see you in the next episode, probably either later this month or in April. So until then, we'll see you guys from here and on our channels.
See you guys.